My name is Marion Rosefield Whitmore. I'm 65 years old. For nearly half a century, I was a wife, a mother, and the quiet soul of Hazelbrook Orchards, a modest but thriving organic apple farm resting in the gentle hills of Pennsylvania. My hands, though stiffened with arthritis, still recall every motion of kneading sourdough dough and trimming branches in the misty mornings alongside Richard, my husband. 3 weeks ago, I laid him to rest. Richard and I had been married since 1981. Together we built everything: the orchard, the farmhouse, the family. Yet the morning after his funeral, I realized perhaps I hadn't built what I imagined. Or maybe it was never enough to keep my children close. Richard passed away from pancreatic cancer. 14 months of watching a man so rooted in the earth wither away little by little, his strength drained piece by piece. Don't let the children know. Let them hold on to their lives without this cloud above them, he had murmured one night, his words heavy with morphine. Because I loved him, I promised. But I had already sensed it. Darren and Samantha, our children, had drifted long before the diagnosis. Darren, the elder, had carved out a demanding career in Boston's finance world and had been home only a handful of weekends over the past decade. Samantha wandered between one failed wellness business and the next, always leaning on Richard's savings, always asking for one more loan. I prayed grief might pull them back to the roots of who we were: the orchard, the meals around the long table, the love that shaped this house. But when they came for the funeral, I didn't see children mourning their father. I saw polished professionals calculating what could be inherited. The evening after the funeral, I sat by myself in the kitchen, staring at the worn grain of our old dining table. I had told them we could sort through Richard's belongings together the following day. It was a simple gesture, a mother's way of opening space for remembrance. But they had other priorities. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the lace curtains Richard and I had picked out nearly 30 years ago. I brewed a pot of plain coffee, the kind Richard always preferred, not the fancy imported blend Darren had hauled in from Boston. I waited at the table. They appeared dressed sharply, Darren in a tailored blazer he didn't bother removing, Samantha in a silk blouse with hair curled to perfection. They looked like they were on their way to a corporate negotiation, not a quiet morning remembering their father. "Mom," Darren began, setting down his mug with the same deliberate precision his father once had. "We've been talking." Samantha's eyes shifted quickly between us before she added, "We think it's time to begin settling matters. The estate, the farm, the house." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Settling. "It's practical," Darren explained. "You can't maintain the orchard by yourself and the house. It's far too large for someone at your stage in life. My stage in life." The words pressed heavy in the room. I had braved blizzards trimming those trees, managed payroll when we couldn't hire help, baked pies for fundraisers, hauled crates to food pantries, driven tractors alone when Richard was sick. "We just want you comfortable," Samantha added smoothly, her tone almost rehearsed. "There's a wonderful retirement village about 2 hours south, Sunnyvale Estates. Activities, companionship, people your age." I rose to clear the breakfast plates, needing movement to steady my trembling hands. Darren then drew out a folder. "Dad spoke with me about this last year," he said, sliding papers across the table. "He wanted Melissa and me to take over." I glanced at the documents. They were on Darren's firm's letterhead. Richard's signature looked firm, too neat, too steady. It didn't match the handwriting of a man weakened by morphine. "This didn't come from our family attorney," I said firmly. "He was clear-minded when he signed." Darren insisted. "He wanted this," Samantha cut in quickly. "A fresh start. There's a developer offering $7 million for the land. Everyone would be secure. You'd be cared for, a developer. They wanted to flatten the orchard, erase decades of harvest, replace roots and memories with pavement and cul-de-sacs." "You're talking about selling your father's life's work," I said quietly. "Mom, be reasonable," Darren replied, his voice cool. "The orchard can't endure forever." Something lit inside me, a slow fury I hadn't felt since chasing off a fox near the chicken coop years ago. I steadied my gaze on them, my children, and said, calm but firm, "Show me the will." Darren hesitated, then nudged the folder closer. I didn't touch it. "I'm going to bed," I said evenly. "We'll talk tomorrow," but deep down I knew. There would be no tomorrow's conversation. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed Richard and I had shared for decades, listening to the creaks in the farmhouse walls and the faint wind brushing against the apple trees outside. Every sound felt familiar. It was the silence in my children's hearts that had grown unrecognizable. By morning, the scent of coffee drifted through the house. Not the warm, humble kind Richard liked, but sharp, imported, Darren's taste. My joints ached, not only from age, but from betrayal. When I reached the kitchen, they were already waiting, coats on, bags ready. The suitcase wasn't mine. "We packed some essentials for you," Samantha said brightly. "Thought we could drive you to Sunnyvale today. Just for a look. You don't have to decide yet." "I'm not going to a retirement community," I answered, pouring myself coffee. Darren glanced at his watch. "Mom, be realistic. The paperwork is finished. We close with the developers next week. You can't remain here." "I've lived here my entire adult life," I replied calmly. "This house is my home." "It's everyone's," Darren countered flatly. "Dad left the business to us. You need to let go." I stared at him. Not as the boy who once followed Richard through the orchards asking questions about bees and frost, but as a stranger who saw me only as an obstacle to manage. "I need my medication," I said softly, "and I'd like to gather some family photographs." Samantha nodded quickly, relieved. "Take whatever personal things you want. We'll ship the rest." Upstairs I didn't cry. I collected my pills, but also something they had no idea existed. Behind a small panel in the medicine cabinet Richard installed in the 80s, I retrieved my passport and birth certificate. Then, in the closet, tucked behind Richard's flannel shirts, I pulled out a heavy fireproof box. Inside was something more powerful than keepsakes. The original deed to 20 acres of land, purchased in my maiden name before marriage. Land with water rights, land essential to any development. When I came downstairs, my purse weighed heavier, but my heart felt lighter. "Ready?" Darren asked. "Of course," I said, allowing Samantha to take my arm. I let them think I had surrendered. We drove past blooming fields, past the school where I once volunteered, past the library where I'd read stories to children. But instead of merging onto the highway toward Sunnyvale, Darren turned down a remote county road. 20 minutes later, he pulled onto a gravel shoulder near an empty field. "This is where you get off, Mom," he said as casually as if pointing out a stop sign. "The house and orchard are ours now." Samantha's smile cracked. "Darren, what?" "She'll contest the will, cause trouble. This way is cleaner. She has clothes, her medication. There's a gas station 5 miles up." He opened my door. And just like that, they left me on the roadside with nothing, or so they believed. The car disappeared in a swirl of dust, leaving me standing with a suitcase I hadn't packed, the wind tugging at my coat. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't even frightened. I was free. I began walking, not toward the gas station Darren mentioned, but toward town, toward my next step. My shoes weren't meant for gravel, and the spring sun pressed warm against my neck. But with each step, my resolve grew steadier. In my purse was everything I needed: identification, my passport, my medicine, and most important of all, the deed to those 20 acres of prime orchard land. Land my children didn't even know existed. Land I had purchased in my own name, long before Richard and I wed. A safeguard back then. Richard called it our just-in-case plan. Now it was my lifeline. Those acres weren't ordinary. They held the only natural water source for the orchard. Without it, no irrigation. Without irrigation, no farm, and no development. My children thought they had cornered me. But they didn't understand the soil beneath their feet. I did. After nearly 2 hours of steady walking, my feet burned with blisters, but I finally reached the edge of Hazelbrook. The familiar sight of Miller's Gas and Grocery appeared, small and unchanged, the kind of place where people still greeted each other by name and often paid in cash. I sank onto the wooden bench outside and watched cars pull in and out. To most, I probably looked like nothing more than a weary older woman clutching a suitcase, but inside my bag I carried something far more valuable than they could ever imagine: the truth. Ray Miller stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. He'd known me for over 30 years. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his brow knitting with concern. "Are you all right? You look pale." "Just resting, Ray. It's been a long morning," I answered softly. His gaze dropped to the suitcase, then back to me with a gentleness that almost undid me. "I'm real sorry about Richard. He was a good man." "Yes," I nodded, steadying myself. "Yes, he truly was." After a pause, I asked carefully, "Ray, could I use the phone? If it's not too much trouble." "Of course," he said, guiding me inside, past shelves of canned peaches and discounted cereal, to a small office in the back. I dialed a number etched into memory. Harold Jennings, our family lawyer for over 3 decades. "Naomi," he answered on the first ring, surprised. "I've been trying to reach you. I expected you at the will reading." My grip tightened around the receiver. "What reading?" There was silence on the line before he spoke again. Darren presented a document. I had doubts. It didn't match the updated file your husband and I worked on last year. "I need your help," I said firmly, my voice no longer trembling. "And I'll need your discretion. You'll have both," he replied without hesitation. "Come to my office. 1 hour." I hung up and turned back to Ray. "Do you sell prepaid phones?" He nodded. "Got a few." "Want one?" "Yes, and a bottle of water." He tried to hand them over without taking my money. "On the house, Mrs. Whitmore." "Anything else you need, you just say the word." His kindness nearly cracked the wall I had built around myself. But I didn't weep when I buried Richard, and I wouldn't break now. I had work to do. Harold's office sat above the town library in an old Victorian on Main Street. He'd been our lawyer since before Darren and Samantha were born, a man who still wore sweater vests without irony and believed a handshake meant something. His secretary, Helen, gasped lightly when she saw me. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Jennings is expecting you. Would you like some water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you," I replied. Harold greeted me at the door and guided me not to his desk, but to 2 leather chairs near the window. His posture was slightly more stooped than I remembered, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Marian," he said gently, "tell me everything," so I did. I recounted the funeral, the so-called will, the cold conversation in the kitchen, the car ride, the roadside abandonment, every detail. He didn't interrupt, just listened with darkening expression. When I finished, I pulled the fireproof box from my purse and set the deed into his hands. His breath caught. Marian, this is gold. Not just land, but leverage. With these water rights and zoning laws, no developer can touch the orchard without this." "I know," I said. He studied the paper reverently. "The will Darren submitted. It's forged." I suspected when I saw the signature. It was too smooth for a man under hospice care. "We'll challenge it," Harold promised. "That will take time, but this," he tapped the deed, "this gives us immediate ground. You still control the most critical section. They can't move forward without your consent." "I want my home back," I whispered, "and I want my children to truly see what they've done." Harold's eyes softened. "Then we'll make them see." Over the following week, Harold and I moved quietly, like chess players biding our time. We gathered records, tax forms, Richard's hospital notes, the genuine draft of his will. The contrast between Richard's shaky, pain-numbed handwriting and the sharp, lawyerly scrawl on Darren's forged version was undeniable. Harold explained each step carefully. "We'll file a motion to contest the will. That will freeze everything until a judge rules. They can't sell, can't transfer, can't bulldoze a single tree." I nodded, though my heart was heavy. I hadn't raised Darren and Samantha to be reckless, greedy adults. I'd raised them on orchard soil, under the same sky where their father taught them to prune branches and harvest apples without bruising the fruit. How had they forgotten? At night, I stayed in the guest room above Harold's office, staring at the ceiling fan as memories replayed. Samantha pressing blossoms into her scrapbook. Darren trying to drive the tractor too young, his laughter ringing across the fields. But grief and longing had to stand aside now. What kept me steady was Richard's voice in my memory. "The land will take care of you, Marian, if you take care of it." Don't ever let anyone strip it bare. When the court date arrived, I dressed simply. Navy dress, pearl earrings Richard had given me on our 20th anniversary. Darren and Samantha entered the courtroom polished and confident, flanked by their attorneys. Darren's eyes slid over me as though I were an obstacle rather than his mother. The judge asked for opening remarks. Darren's lawyer painted a picture of practicality. A struggling orchard, an aging widow, children ready to step in and preserve the family's legacy by modernizing. Samantha nodded solemnly, as though this performance were truth. Then Harold rose. Calmly, methodically, he presented the true will Richard had signed with the hospital nurse's witness statement. He displayed the zoning deeds, my deeds, and explained what they meant. Without my signature, the land could never be transferred. Finally, he highlighted the inconsistencies in Darren's forged document. Whispers spread across the courtroom benches. Darren's confident mask faltered. Samantha flushed red, twisting the bracelet on her wrist. When the judge called for my testimony, I stood tall. For 45 years, my husband and I cared for that orchard. Through storms, drought, illness, we kept it alive. Richard did not wish for his land to be paved over for shopping centers. He wanted his children to inherit not just profit, but roots. If they cannot honor that, then I will. My voice did not shake. For the first time since Richard's passing, I felt him beside me. The judge recessed, promising a ruling within days. Darren and Samantha avoided my eyes as we left the room. Outside, Harold leaned close. We've done enough. You've done enough. Now, it's in the judge's hands. I exhaled slowly, watching leaves scatter across the courthouse steps. For the first time in weeks, hope fluttered in my chest, but hope, I knew, had to be tempered with resolve. 3 days later, the courthouse smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish when we returned for the ruling. I carried nothing but my purse and Richard's wedding band, which I'd strung onto a thin chain around my neck that morning. The judge read his decision slowly. Carefully, Darren's will was declared invalid. The orchard remained in my name, and all estate matters would be settled under the authentic will Richard had finalized the year before. The forged document was condemned as fraudulent, though no charges were pressed, a mercy I had quietly requested. Darren's jaw tightened. Samantha blinked hard as if willing back tears. They didn't look at me, not once. When the session ended, people filed out quickly. Harold clasped my hand. You've won, Marion. The land is safe. Richard would be proud, I smiled faintly. It was never about winning, Harold. It was about remembering who we are. Outside, the September sun warmed my face. For the first time in months, I breathed without the weight of fear. A week later, I walked the orchard alone. The trees stood tall, branches heavy with fruit just beginning to blush red. I traced my hand along the bark of the oldest apple tree, the one Richard had planted the year Darren was born. The soil smelled of rain and earth, rich and alive. That evening, I baked pies for the church fundraiser, my kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and butter. I set aside one extra pie and carried it to Ray Miller at the store as thanks for his kindness. As for Darren and Samantha, they left town quietly. They didn't call and I didn't chase them. My heart ached, of course, but I knew this. Love cannot live where greed takes root. Perhaps time would soften them. Perhaps it wouldn't, but I had Richard's orchard, my home, and the steady knowledge that I had honored the vows we once whispered under the summer sky. To cherish, to protect, to endure. One morning, weeks later, as I watched the sunrise spill gold across the orchard, I whispered aloud, "It's safe, Richard. It's safe." And in the hush of dawn, surrounded by the land we had built together, I felt it. A peace deeper than grief, steady as the earth beneath my feet. The orchard would outlast me. That was enough.